And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're receiving this information. My name is Rafael Vázquez Guzmán, and this is your show, Líderes del Futuro, on KBBF 89.1 FM, that is celebrating its 50th anniversary. KBBF is the first bilingual nonprofit radio station in the history of the United States. And in 2023, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary. Today, we have the privilege and opportunity to once again have Dr. Francisco Jimenez visiting with us. You were here with us in the middle of the pandemic, and we had a wonderful conversation on our YouTube channel, Líderes del Futuro. Over 1,000 people were able and privileged to watch this conversation. So welcome back, Dr. Jimenez, to the show. And today we want to talk about a little bit about your story and your wonderful books that many of us as immigrants and refugees can connect to them. And then we want to talk about this brand new project you're working on. So again, welcome. Tell us a little bit about Francisco Jimenez.
Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk a little bit about my work. I was born in San Pedro Tlaquepaque in the state of Jalisco, and in an environment that was very poor. So my family decided to cross the border without documentation, hoping to leave our poverty behind and to start a new and better life. So we ended up in Santa Maria, California, where we lived in a tent that was provided by the grower. And so there we picked strawberries, and then we would go to the San Joaquin Valley to pick grapes and then cotton. And then at the end of the cotton season, at the end of December, first part of January, we would return to Santa Maria to top carrots and to thin lettuce. And that was the circuit that we followed for the first 9 years that we were here. When I was in the 8th grade, my father could not continue working in the fields anymore because he had severe back problems. So my older brother, Roberto, and I got janitorial jobs, working 30 to 35 hours a week each so that we could support our family. And one morning when I was in class, the Border Patrol officer came into the class, took me out, and then drove to Santa Maria High School, where my brother was in his sophomore year, and picked him up, and then went to Bonetti Ranch, where we lived in a migrant camp, and we were deported back to Mexico. So that's during the 9 years that we were here, we were always afraid of being caught by the Border Patrol. And so we could never relax. In school, I could never relax. And so it was a difficult life. And it's not a unique life. It's really the life of many migrants and immigrants who come to this country looking for a better life. And they go through the same similar, or unfortunately, through similar experiences that I had over 50 years ago. And so, so my writing then, I tried to capture that experience in my 4-book series. The first one is titled The Circuit, Stories from the Life of a Migrant Child, that I relate from the child's point of view. And then the second one, Breaking Through, I talk about my experiences in high school. And then the third one, Reaching Out, where I talk about my experience as a first-generation college student at the university. And then the fourth book, Taking Hold, I describe my experiences at Columbia University, where I received my doctorate. And the theme that runs through the 4 books is the transformative power of education. Mm-hmm. That education is the best means by which we can improve our lives. And so, as I said earlier, my story is really the story of many families from the past and the present who work very, very hard from sun up to sundown for very low wages, living in poor living conditions. And thanks to their hard and noble work, all of us can enjoy our meals every single day. And what sustains our families, these families, is the hope and dream of having a better life for their children and their children's children. So these families then inspire me personally and inspire my writing. And I think it's important to document that experience in literature because it is part of the American experience. It's part of who we are as a nation mainly made of immigrants, with the exception of Native Americans who were always here and African Americans who were brought here forcefully and enslaved, unfortunately. But the contributions of the Mexican Latino immigrants have in large part helped to shape who we are as a nation through their contributions, and not only in economically, but also culturally in architecture, in music, in art, and so forth. So that's the reason for writing these books.
One of the things that we, at least here, we call it in academia is testimonio. What you write is my story. What you write is the story of people I know. And therefore, you write your story, but we all can connect to it. For those of us who, again, migrated as undocumented, for those of us who perhaps are still undocumented. There are times where I've worked with undocumented families in Northern California, and sometimes teachers in the K-12 system will say, I don't know why this child cannot focus. And it's like, were you aware that there was a raid? This is years ago. Were you aware that there was an immigration raid a couple of hours ago? How do you expect the child to focus in the classroom when they don't know if when they get home, their parents are still going to be there, right?
Yes.
And again, these are the realities for people. So these books are also not just about the immigrant community, the migrant community, the refugee community, but as you clearly stated, this is part of the history of the United States. This is part of who we are. And I hope that teachers and administrators and policymakers read your books, because little has changed in the United States in relation to the undocumented community. During good times, nobody in the United States seems to bother. When there's difficult economic times, and we saw it again in 2009, 2010, immigrants get blamed for the economy going downhill, when immigrants are the only ones that are willing to work in the fields, and unfortunately they don't get paid a good wage. And so this is why your books are so important. The other piece when you talk about education is, again, the experience of migration, not just migration from their home country to the United States, but as I like to tell my students, migration from the high school that you graduated from to Santa Clara University, and eventually migration from California to New York in order to go to Columbia to get your doctorate. Um, and how, for those individuals migrating from one place to the next or from one school to the next school can be just as traumatic, and why we in higher education need to provide culturally appropriate support for students in order to make sure that they don't end up dropping out. Looking back, how many times do you think you considered dropping out of college, either because you miss your family or because you knew that they were having difficulty paying the bills?
Yes, when I started at Santa Clara my freshman year, I felt out of place. The environment was so different from the environment in which I was raised. And everyone around me seemed so much more well prepared than I. And um, and then I felt guilty, knowing that my family was still struggling economically in Santa Maria. So I felt like that I should quit, that I should go back to home and to help my family. But thanks to my family, they said, "No, you stay in the university. We will manage." And so, to give me the strength not to give up, I began to reflect on my childhood experiences to give me the courage and strength and to move forward. Um, so those are the writings that I continued to do during the 4 years at Santa Clara University. And then when I went to graduate school at Columbia under a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship, I found myself in this feeling the same way I felt my freshman year at Santa Clara. I was surrounded by uh, graduate students who had gone to very prestigious universities in this country, and so when I felt like quitting, I reflected on my childhood experiences to give me the courage not to give up, and also realizing that many people had sacrificed a lot so that I could be where I was. My parents principally, and also my teachers who believed in me and helped me along the way. And then I had a professor, Andres Duarte, who was a writer and my thesis advisor. He was the first faculty that I had during my entire uh, educational career who was Latino. And he opened my eyes to a lot of beautiful things about Mexican culture and literature and so forth. And he was the one who encouraged me to write my story. And so, thanks to him, and I began to write the circuit stories from the life of a migrant child. So I was I feel that would be the way to help alleviate the plight of farm workers by by writing and having the readers who are not familiar with that experience to have better understanding, appreciation, and respect and gratitude for the hard work that migrant workers do. So, in order for all of us to enjoy our meals every single day. And as I say, their story is part of the American stories, and so it should be known.
Definitely. Yeah. And that brings us to, again, you wrote 4 books in this series. The one that, again, tells us the last piece is about your experience at Columbia University. And that book is also, as it's, to me, it's just as important as any of the other books. One, because many of us have never been privileged to get a doctorate. We know from the statistics that UCLA has provided a few years back, for every 100 Latinos who start in high school, only, excuse me, it requires 500 Latinos to get 1 doctorate,
Um,
right? During your time when you did your doctorate, it would require a larger number. One, because we didn't have that many Latinos going to college, but two, it was much, much harder to be able to do this. In California, we have the privilege now that undocumented immigrants can go to college, that undocumented immigrants can become doctors, they can become lawyers. All of those are doctorates. Um, and I think that in the book, what you share, it's a lot again about that experience of having to migrate And again, the loneliness sometimes, the feeling out of place, the comparing yourself and your education to the education of other individuals. And this is why, if we are going to increase the number of Latinos, Latinas in universities with doctorates, your experience is something people should become familiar with. And again, how do we get the right support in order to succeed? So that's why I like, again, the series of your books. I myself, when I was in college, I cried many times while reading your books because you were telling a story that was similar to mine. And as a result of that, I was motivated. I didn't have my mom, my dad to tell me it's okay to keep going or not keep going. I simply didn't have that experience, but the rest of it was there. I had the words that you put in writing that say, keep going. And again, I will always be grateful for that. But that brings us to a new project that you have going on. A lot of people now are not reading as much as we should, and that's a problem all around the country. And so you have been working on a movie. Could you tell us a little bit about this movie you've been working on?
Yes, a small independent company, Normandy Productions, decided to make a movie based on my memoirs. And so Normandy, the owner of this company, read the books and then decided that she would want to make a movie. Uh, it took several years before this finally came to be. So 2 years ago, the company decided that they would do a fundraiser to support the realization of the movie. And so we had 200 and so people make donations from all over the country, and including some from Europe. People who identified with the story supported it, and others who knew about the story also supported it. So then the company then had auditions for actors to represent the characters in the story, and we were fortunate to find very good actors, professional actors, to do so. And the the film was shot in Santa Maria, where we worked this picking strawberries when we first crossed the border and established our new life in this country. And in the fields where we picked strawberries, they shot some of the film, some of the scenes there, and also in some of the people in Santa Maria, mostly Latinos, who saw themselves in this story, also supported the filming of the movie. As a matter of fact, some of the extras who had gone through that experience became part of the movie in the background, because they saw themselves as part of being this. They saw their experience depicted in this film. And the film is short, as I indicated. It's a narrative, a live motion picture that's set in that period of time when I was 4 to the time I was 14 years old. So it deals with the first years of my life and my family's life. So in this country, and the film is going to be submitted to the film festivals, and once it's premiered, then it'll be available to the public. And I feel very blessed that this film is being made or has been made because the purpose for making the film is very similar to the purpose for my writing these books. The film really represents a slice of immigrants who come to this country not knowing the English language, um, going through difficult experiences of discrimination sometimes, living in poor living conditions, sometimes being treated unjustly. And thanks to their hard and noble work, we enjoy our meals every day. So it is part of our story, but it's also part of the American story. And my hope is that the film, like my work, will enhance people's empathy and respect and appreciation for the contributions of Latinos, Mexicans, Central Americans, immigrants who came to this country. And thanks to their work, um, the economic and cultural richness of this country is enhanced. And it is part of our story. It's part of who we are as a nation. So I am very happy that this has happened. So I thank you, Mr. Vasquez, for giving me the opportunity to tell our stories, because as you say, my story is your story, it's the story of many people. And as well as your radio station and your promotion of education and informing the community about the importance of moving ahead and making sacrifices to improve our lives is really invaluable. So I thank you for your radio station, for having me on your program, and also for the books that you have written. And I think it's important for the audience to hear a little bit about the books that you yourself have written.
Definitely. Thank you for that. And thank you for, again, the valuable lessons that you have contributed, as you said, not just to me, but the community in general. And when I say the community, one of the things that we talked about earlier is how people in Europe have read your books and people have been motivated. And when I wrote my simple book that later on was translated into Spanish, I'm trying to provide an opportunity for parents who migrate to this country to continue to support their children's success by talking about how do we best support individuals who migrate into this country. So my book is Fulfilling the Dream, a guide for immigrant parents and allies living in the United States. And again, the intention is to provide information about mental health, education, finances, and everything else with the intention of, again, how do you learn to navigate this country, whether you are a US citizen, resident, or undocumented who had to migrate to this country. Um, and again, that was the intention of that. So thank you for allowing me to share that. And again, your books, we have the list of your books in our website, lideresdelfuturo.org, where people can go and just click and purchase your book. The intention here is that people should be able to gather information. I hope, I look forward to the day when the film that you and your colleagues have produced is available so that teachers like myself will be able to use it in the classroom, so that instead of just talking for 20 minutes about what migration looks like and the fear of deportation and everything else, people will be able to look at your film and be able to say, this is what it feels like. This is what it looks like. And this is the reality of people who work in the fields every day. And again, for teachers who are trying to teach students English as a second language, for teachers who are teaching English classes, using your film, because one of the beautiful things that you mentioned earlier is that the film is in Spanish, but they have English subtitles. And so I'm excited. As soon as it's available, I look forward to being able to share with the community that the film is available, so that combining the books with the film, it's a great way of, again, teaching everyone about the migration experience and the unique challenges that individuals go through. So I thank you for working on the film. And it sounds like hopefully in the future there may be a mini series that will go more in depth on your books. Is that something that is possible?
Yes, it is. And that's the hope of the production team, that someone will be interested in supporting the continuation of the film in 8 or 12 different episodes.
Mm.
And the title of the film now, it's The Unbroken Sky.
And it had really good what is it called, positive reviews. Uh, we've heard, right? You did a private showing of the view in Santa Maria. Could you tell us briefly a little bit about that experience for you?
Yes. We because it hasn't been premiered, we can only show it privately by invitation. So we went to Santa Maria because the community was very supportive of making the film, and we showed the film in the movie theater, and there were 240 people there, many of them who had participated in as background for the film, and others who had contributed resources. And the reaction was overwhelming, positively. People saw themselves in the film. Others who did not go through that experience began to feel that was an important film to show, and for them to understand better what migrant workers and immigrants go through. And it was a standing ovation. And then after the film, the actors, the 4 actors, and the producer, the scriptwriter, and I were able to field questions from the audience. And after that, we had a little reception in Santa Maria High School, where I went to school, for everyone. And we sang and cried. And I mean, it was a wonderful experience for everybody. And it was a very inclusive audience. So that was something that I really appreciated. So thank you again for giving me the opportunity to say something about the film.
Yeah, definitely. I think that you've reached a wonderful point where your books can also be made into films, and people can benefit from reading the books and then watching the film. So I look forward to the day when that film becomes available to the public. And again, please let us know. That way, in the future, we can promote that for community. Your story is our story in many ways, and as a result of that, we are feeling better about ourselves when we migrate to this country. We feel out of place. We read your books. And for parents who have kids who were born in the United States and haven't had to work in the fields, please make sure that your children purchase these books, excuse me, so that they can learn about the people that put the food on the table every day. And with that, I want to thank you, as always, Dr. Francisco Jimenez, for taking the time out of your busy schedule. You're in retirement, but you're working, I think, almost as much as when you were working at Santa Clara University. So I want to thank you for taking the time being with us here at Líderes del Futuro with su servidor, Rafael Vázquez Guzmán, on KBBF 89.1 FM in Northern California and kbbf.org for the rest of the world. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Professor Vasquez.